Welcome to worship in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. Last night was the longest night of the year, the winter solstice, the moment when the northern hemisphere is tilted farthest away from the sun. It's understandable that we tend to be less comfortable in the dark than in the daylight. Our ancestors had much reason to fear nighttime. The cold, the uncertainty about what might be hungry and waiting beyond their sight. Collectively, we remain in the habit of celebrating only the goodness of light, throwing away too quickly the gifts and beauty of darkness. Naturalist writer Henry Beston spent a few years living alone on the coast of Massachusetts. During that time, he got to know darkness in a new way, and he was inspired to write the following: "Learn to reverence night and put away the vulgar fear of it. With the banishment of night from the experience of human beings, there vanishes as well a religious emotion, a poetic mood which gives depth to the adventure of humanity." Beston says, "When the great earth abandoning day rolls up the deeps of the heavens, a new door opens for the human spirit. And there are few so clownish that some awareness of the mystery of being does not touch them as they gaze." In this hour set apart, we immerse ourselves in a celebration of darkness. As we prepare to sing, please turn and welcome the people around you.
Rumi says, every person is two people. One is awake in the darkness, and the other is asleep in the light. I light this candle as a guide while we explore today this being awake to darkness. Welcome again to today's service. We're happy that you're with us today in this room or joining us remotely. We're pleased to have guests with us. Our members would like to greet you personally following the service. So if you're visiting, would you please raise your hand? Please keep it up. Members, take a note of the guests seated with you, and after the service, invite them to join us for coffee and conversation in Freeman Hall. Should it enhance your experience of future services, you can find both a large print order of service and a personal hearing device at the table at the entrance to the sanctuary. And there's also an elevator if you need it. If you'd like to learn more about us, fill out one of the yellow cards and place it in an offering basket later in the service. Members with a life event to share can do so on the reverse side of the cards. The cards and envelopes are on the clipboards at the end of each row. Please begin passing them now. Visitors interested in hearing about how to become a member can talk to our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. Her contact information is on the back of your order. Again, to each of you, welcome. Now we begin our ode to darkness, preparing ourselves for this evening when night will come quickly, blurring the trees together a moment before tucking every house, every street, every being beneath its velvet blanket.
In this time of long winter nights, we offer our praise to the dark, giving thanks for the blessing of blackness in our lives. The freshly brewed cup of coffee we hold in our palms, the dark fragrance holding us still a moment before the demands of the day find us.
Digging deep in rich black soil, cool to the touch, the damp earth lingering on our clothing, smelling of life.
The way black ink, the midwife of creativity, brings a blank page to life.
The blessing of shadow amidst the glare of the sun. the gift of shade against unmerciful heat.
Exploring the braided rise and fall of black licorice with our tongue, searching for sweetness within tang and spice.
The dark shimmer of a raven's wing, crisp black shapes lending vibrant flashes, a welcome contrast against a gray winter sky.
The abundance of homemade chocolate cake. The scent of cloves.
The black warm haven of the womb. We give thanks for darkness, protector of life, still too fragile to face the light. Japanese author Junichiro Taniyazaki explores the every night beauty and pleasure that darkness provides in his book, In Praise of Shadows. For Taniyazaki, even the simple act of eating is enriched by shadow. He writes, "So benumbed are we nowadays by electric lights that we've become utterly insensitive to the evils of excessive illumination. Japanese cooking depends on shadows and is inseparable from darkness. We find it hard to really be at home with things that shine and glitter. The Westerner uses silver and steel and nickel tableware and polishes it to a fine brilliance. But we object to the practice. We begin to enjoy it only when the luster has worn off, when it has begun to take on the dark, smoky patina." He continues, "I know few greater pleasures than holding a bowl of soup in my hands. There's a beauty in that moment between removing the lid and lifting the bowl to the mouth, when one gazes at the still silent liquid in the dark depths of the bowl. What lies within the darkness one cannot distinguish, but the palm senses the gentle movements of the liquid, and the vapor rises from within, forming droplets on the rim. The fragrance is carried on the vapor, and it brings a delicate anticipation, a moment of mystery. With Japanese food, a brightly lit room and a shining tableware cut the appetite in half."
This is a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke called On Darkness. You, darkness that I come from, I love you more than all the fires that fence in the world. For the fire makes a circle of light for everyone, and then no one outside learns of you. But the darkness pulls in everything, shapes and fires, animals and myself. How easily it gathers them, powers and people. And it is possible. A great energy is moving near me. I have faith in nights.
Good morning. I really love this discussion of darkness, and I'm honored to bring my reflection to you. Darkness as a blessing. One of the beautiful and powerful aspects about being a human, we get to choose how we cast our situation, our circumstances that we're in. One person can have a nightmare. Another person can see it as a chance to reveal subconscious dream work. Total darkness frightens many, but others see it as a chance for introspection, for imagination, for gestation. As a child, I loved the dark. I like those big empty appliance boxes that you could crawl inside and be in total darkness. My imagination would run wild in there. Author James Hillman, he offers, until our culture recognizes the legitimacy of growing down, each person in the culture struggles blindly to make sense of the darkness that the soul requires to deepen into life. My childhood home in California was near a mountain with a mile-long train tunnel going through it. A curve in the tunnel created a quarter-mile of total blackness. This frightening, dangerous, and irresistible rite of passage was located, unfortunately, close to my neighborhood. I was a precocious preteen with a whole bunch of I dare you comrades. And this tunnel offered us a chance to run wildly, blindly through darkness. We were stepping on all sorts of gooey stuff. And there was always this exhilarating possibility that you'd get caught inside there and there'd be a fire-breathing monster of a locomotive pass through while you were in there. That total darkness, it sharpened every sense, except, of course, common sense. And I remember the adrenaline pushing time into slow motion till I saw that little archway of light around the bend. One of my favorite poets, Robert Bly, he tells a version of Iron John. And in his version of this powerful story, there's a young man who's searching for danger and adventure. His journey leads him to a kingdom that has a dark forest that's known for people going in, but not coming out. Many of the king's bravest knights went in and didn't come out. And when that young man arrives and he says, "Is there any danger here?" Well, he's told there's a forest, but people go in there and don't come out. A deterrent to most becomes irresistible to this young man, and despite the advice of many, he heads into the dark. He finds himself at the edge of a dark lagoon in the middle of the dark woods, and just as he's wondering what the hell the big deal was. The dark waters suddenly stir, and this hairy arm reaches out and grabs his dog and pulls it under the water. In this frightening moment, he says to himself, aha, this must be the place. I don't have any trouble understanding why he needed to enter that forest. I was him. The times of my life that offered the greatest potential for personal growth were also the darkest nights of my soul. The late Mary Oliver insightfully describes my first marriage. Someone I loved once gave me a box of darkness, she said. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. And Rumi says, no matter how fast you run, your shadow always more than catches up. Sometimes it's in front. That shadow's been serving you. What hurts you blesses you. Darkness is your candle. I believe that if we face this darkness in this darkest time of year together, we will not only discover the power to rekindle that divine spark that connects us all, but we'll also rediscover the value of the darkness itself. Thank you. This next reading is a poem by Lucille Clifton entitled Cutting Greens. Curling them around, I hold their bodies in obscene embrace, thinking of everything but kinship. Collards and kale strange against each strange other, away from my kiss-making hand and the iron bed pot. The pot is black. The cutting board is black. My hand. And just for a moment, the greens roll back under the knife and the kitchen twists dark on its spine. And I taste in my natural appetite the bond of live things everywhere.
For Lucille Clifton, standing there in her kitchen cutting greens, it is in the color black that she recognizes and experiences just for a moment the breathtaking kinship of all life. Junichiro Taniyazaki describes the delicate anticipation, the moment of mystery created by holding in one's hands the gentle darkness of steaming soup. And Rilke confides at the end of his poetic celebration of darkness, "I have faith in nights." In contrast, a bright light shone in our eyes is painful and jarring. The dull buzz of fluorescent bulbs can make our mind weary and our spirit numb. Light can wipe out contours, dimension, and texture in a photograph, leaving the figures in the picture vague and unremarkable. Imagine how we would need to close our painfully throbbing eyes after staring for too long at an endless cold expanse of glaring snow. Sometimes when we describe someone or something as pale, we mean drained of energy and life. A bright light and white, sterile surroundings at the doctor's office can get our heart thumping with fear. Sun poisoning, heat stroke. The sun can make us sick. Yet we do not speak often of the downsides of light or the gifts of darkness. While studying the color wheel, children learn the term high value, which means lighter shades of color, and the term low value, which means darker shades. Olivia Good, a high school art teacher in Chicago, published an article entitled "Color Lines," exploring the implications of how we teach color to our children. Early in her career, Ms. Good created all kinds of lesson plans related to the symbolism of dark and light. She watched over the years how students responded. If they were asked to create a sense of foreboding, of fear, or despair in their work, they drew dark storm clouds, trees heavy with shadow. If they were instructed to depict innocence or hope or beauty, they worked in lighter shades, creating streams of whiteness descending from the skies, a yellow glow around human figures. What was closest to death, or evil, or terrifying would be dark. What was full of life, good, safe, holy, or beautiful would be light. Ms. Good showed her students the same pattern throughout classical and modern art, the shared symbolic language they would need to know in order to interpret other works of art throughout their lives. Whiteness and light can be used to produce a sense of ease. Blackness and dark are unsettling. Except it doesn't always play out that way in real life. Writer Bell Hooks is an African-American woman. In her essay, Home Place, A Site of Resistance, She writes about her experience of crossing from the segregated blackness of her own community into a poor white neighborhood in order to visit her grandparents' house. She writes, "I remember the fear, being scared to walk to Baba's, our grandmother's house, because we would have to pass the terrifying whiteness. Those white faces on the porches staring us down with hate." She continues, that feeling of safety, of arrival, of homecoming when we finally reached the edge of their yard, when we could see the soot-black face of our grandfather sitting in his chair on the porch, smell his cigar, and rest on his lap. Such a contrast, Hooks writes. That feeling of arrival, of homecoming, this black sweetness, with the bitterness of that journey through whiteness. We've seen the symbolic depiction of the darkness of despair and the light of hope so many times that it has created deep grooves in our imagination. And that's just what Ms. Good began to recognize after years of teaching. Her students were, of course, relying on their individual experiences when they created art, but they were also drawing from a collective imagination, the coloring of our shared cultural imagination. Ms. Good reflects that there is a strong tendency for teachers to continue speaking in a language of scientific certainty when discussing the symbolic meaning of colors. This results, she writes, in particular color preferences and associations being validated in the students' minds as not merely habitual or customary, but as natural and instinctive. This shared cultural imagination we've inherited leaves no room for the words we sang together earlier. The dark of winter, soft and still, ease my mind profoundly. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me. This limiting cultural imagination leaves little room for faith in nights and the everyday beauty of the dark, from the flash of a blackbird's wings to the comfort of morning coffee. Instead, black and white, dark and light, are typecast in limited roles in the stories we tell ourselves about the world and each other. Bell Hooks writes that stereotypes, however inaccurate, are one form of representation. Like fictions, she says, they are created to serve as substitutions, standing in for what is real. They are a fantasy, a projection onto the other. Stereotypes abound, Hooks says, where there is distance. They are an invention, a pretense that one knows when the steps that would make real knowing possible are not taken. What if we stopped telling stories about the dark from a removed distance? What if we instead immerse ourselves in the beauty and gifts of blackness until we have learned another spectrum of wisdom, mystery, and goodness? We could immerse ourselves in the dark until something real takes root beneath the porcelain confines of this black, white, dark, light dichotomy in our collective imagination, until we form cracks in this simplistic understanding, revealing a complexity and nuance that better reflects the lived experiences of human beings. Let us make a wintertime spiritual practice of immersing ourselves in darkness, allowing ourselves to learn, as Henry Beston says, to reverence night, experiencing how the dark revives in us a religious emotion, the poetic mood which gives depth to the adventure of humanity. Let us seek beauty in the places where we've been told not to look. Notice darkness and the blessings of blackness in everyday life. Let us make this our spiritual practice until our sense of what is holy and beautiful and good is expansive enough to honor our own lived experience. I invite you now into a time of meditation. And I encourage you to close your eyes, allowing yourself to sit with darkness for a moment. Deepening your breath, relaxing your shoulders, trusting the floor to hold you steady. Sweet Darkness by David White. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Amen. There are a number of opportunities for enjoying one another's company here this week. Believe it or not, Tuesday is Christmas Eve, and we have 3 services we will hold here. One at 3 and one at 5 p.m. Both of those services are a lot of fun and very family and child-friendly. And then the 7:30 p.m. service is a more contemplative experience. And for those with us via live stream, we'll be live streaming the 7:30 service, so we hope you can join us. Be sure on Christmas Eve to bring your favorite holiday cookies to share at one of our 2 cookie receptions in Freeman Hall. There's one at 4 and one at 6. And then you can come back on Christmas Day for a 1 p.m. potluck with new and familiar faces. You can sign up in Freeman Hall or through Currents. And finally, you have until the end of the year, December 31st, members, to respond to the Focus 2020 email you received this week, asking for a straw poll response to our continued work of reconsidering our congregation's name. During this season of holiday cheer, know that if you are weary or your heart is heavy, we hope you will feel held by this community and remember that you are not alone. In just a moment, when the offering baskets are being passed and music is being played, you're welcome, member and visitor alike, to come forward and light a candle to honor whatever joy, sorrow, or remembrance you carry with you this morning.
You know, this exploration and honoring of darkness, it's healthy, it's important. But if we don't want to be permanently plunged into darkness, please share what you can and keep the lights on in this building. We'll now give and receive the offering. Thank you.
This is a poem by Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Ann Parker. At this winter's turning of the year, let us go gently for once into the night. Its dream-drenched, glittering stillness, a haven for our souls. There is something beyond the dull brightness of midday, fluorescent and buzzing. Something to praise beyond the sun triumphing over the intricacies of shadowed moonlight. Bring in the old, beautiful realm of holy night, echoing with ancient voices, rustling with intimacy's passion, luminous with stars. Cradled in darkness, be restored to the embrace of mystery. Glory wakes here. Let it kindle your joy. Please be seated.